Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling small, but couldn't quite explain why? Have you been laughed at subtly, ignored, or guilt-tripped only to question if it was even real? What if I told you that most disrespect doesn't come in loud arguments, but in whispers, glances, and silence? In this video, we'll break down how subtle disrespect chips away at your confidence, how to recognize manipulation for what it is, and most importantly, how to build boundaries so solid that disrespect bounces right off you. If you're serious about self-respect, emotional clarity, and mastering the art of peaceful strength, make sure to subscribe right now and join this path of personal power. 1. Subtle disrespect, the quiet thief of self-worth. Disrespect rarely announces itself. It's rarely the shouted insult or the outright dismissal we expect. More often, it creeps in subtly through passive-aggressive jokes, side glances, and dismissive tones. It shows up when someone talks over you in meetings, but laughs it off as being passionate. It whispers through comments like, "You're too sensitive," when something clearly crosses a line. It hides behind words like "relax" or "it was just a joke," phrases meant to invalidate your feelings while maintaining the speaker's control. These forms of disrespect are easy to dismiss, but over time, they become insidious. They plant doubt, cause hesitation, and chip away at your sense of self in small but powerful ways. They make you question your perception. Did that really happen? Am I overreacting? Maybe it's not a big deal. These questions seem harmless, but they begin to rewrite your internal narrative. Suddenly, your standards start to feel like overreactions and your boundaries feel like burdens to others. You begin to prioritize being liked over being respected. That is how the thief gets in, not through the front door, but through the cracks we're too tired or too afraid to seal. When you tolerate these things, even in silence, you start to erode. Not all at once, but slowly. The process is almost invisible. It's in the hesitation before you speak up. It's in the way you accept being interrupted. It's in the stories you start to tell yourself about why you're not as capable, valuable, or worthy as others. Take David, for example, a high achiever, the kind of person who once radiated confidence. But over time, that confidence became brittle. Not because he made mistakes or lacked talent, but because the people around him constantly reduced him to the butt of the joke. "Lighten up, David," they'd say, laughing, after subtly undermining his work or character. It was always just a joke, but the damage was real. The problem wasn't the content of each comment. It was the repetition, the normalization, and the group's silence. Even David stayed silent. He didn't want to be the difficult one. He didn't want to cause waves. So he laughed along, and each laugh was a small betrayal of himself. That's how subtle disrespect works. It invites you to betray yourself in small, quiet ways that don't feel like a big deal, until one day they are. If you don't name it, it'll name you, and that name will be less than. You'll start to embody the role others have carved out for you, not because it fits, but because you stopped fighting it. That's why recognizing disrespect in its quietest form is so essential. You can't fix what you won't admit. You can't reclaim your worth while accepting crumbs of validation. And you can't demand respect if you've convinced yourself that you don't deserve it. Naming it is not about drama. It's not about confrontation for its own sake. It's about clarity. It's about saying, "This isn't okay with me," and standing by that truth. When you do, something powerful happens. You remember who you are. You start to see the gap between how you're treated and how you deserve to be treated. And once you see that gap, you can no longer pretend it's not there. The quiet thief only wins if you remain quiet too. 2. The Stoic Way, strength without the noise. The Stoics taught that real power is quiet, not the silence of avoidance or fear, but the stillness of someone grounded in truth. a person who has nothing to prove and nothing to hide. When you're disrespected, the common urge is to fight fire with fire, to yell back, to argue, to prove your worth in the noise. But true self-respect doesn't need an audience. It doesn't come from convincing others. It comes from a deep understanding of who you are and what you deserve. The Stoics believed in internal control, meaning no one could take your peace without your permission. They taught that your reactions, not the world's actions, determine your freedom. So when someone disrespects you, they're offering you a choice. Will you surrender your peace to their chaos, or will you hold your ground with quiet strength? Your boundary doesn't need to be loud. It needs to be clear. You don't need to shout to be firm. You don't need to rage to be resolved. Think of a stone in the middle of a storm. It doesn't move just because the wind screams. It remains. That's the essence of the Stoic approach to disrespect. You don't need to convince someone to respect you. You just need to live in such a way that disrespect has no place in your presence. You make it clear, through action, tone, and boundaries, that you won't engage with those who treat you with contempt. That clarity alone is often enough. And when it isn't, when someone continues to cross the line, you don't need to retaliate. You simply step away. Not out of weakness, but out of deep, quiet strength. You teach people how to treat you not by what you shout at them, but by what you allow and what you walk away from. A Stoic response says, "I know my worth. I see your behavior, I do not accept it, and that's enough. No drama, no chaos, just clarity." That clarity becomes a shield, one that protects your peace, even when others try to disturb it. It's not about pretending disrespect doesn't hurt. It's about refusing to give it power over you. The Stoics didn't teach emotional numbness. They taught emotional mastery. That means feeling the sting of disrespect, but choosing your response with wisdom, not impulse. It's about pausing, breathing, and responding in alignment with your values. When someone tries to shake you, the greatest power you can have is to remain grounded, to speak with intention, not emotion, to assert, not explode. In a world addicted to outrage and noise, the one who remains still becomes unforgettable. And that kind of strength, the kind that doesn't shout, is the kind that endures. 3. Face it or chase it, confronting disrespect with dignity. When someone crosses your line, you've got two choices: avoid it or address it. And every time you avoid it, even with good intentions, you unintentionally teach them that your boundaries are negotiable, that your discomfort is secondary to their convenience. It might feel easier in the moment to let it go, to not say anything, to smile and move on. But over time, this avoidance becomes a pattern, and patterns become identity. You become the person who never says anything, who always lets things slide, who's easygoing to the point of invisibility. That might win you temporary peace, but it costs you long-term self-respect, because deep down, you know when something feels off. You know when a comment stings. You know when behavior crosses a line. And every time you pretend not to notice, you drift further from your truth. That internal dissonance, the space between what you feel and what you express, starts to wear on your sense of self. Sooner or later, you either confront it or you chase your dignity through frustration and resentment. Respectfully confronting someone doesn't make you aggressive. It makes you honest. It says, "I value myself enough to speak. I respect you enough to be direct." It doesn't require anger or accusations, just clarity. A simple sentence like, "That comment wasn't okay with me," can be powerful. It's not an attack. It's a mirror. It gives the other person a chance to see their behavior and respond accordingly. And that response? It tells you everything. If they apologize, if they adjust, if they take responsibility, you know they respect you. If they mock you, minimize it, or flip it back on you, you know they never did. Either way, the clarity empowers you. It removes the guesswork. It gives you the information you need to decide who belongs in your life and who doesn't. You're not obligated to educate everyone who disrespects you, but you are responsible for protecting your peace. Confrontation, done with dignity, is a form of that protection. Boundaries aren't about control, they're about truth. They're not walls to keep people out, but lines that define where you end and someone else begins. And when someone repeatedly steps over that line, you have every right to step back. Not in anger, but in alignment. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is walk away, not with fire, not with revenge, not with bitterness, but with clarity. You don't need to burn bridges. You just need to stop crossing ones that lead to disrespect. Walking away doesn't mean giving up. It means choosing yourself. It means saying, I deserve better, and acting like it. That's not weakness, it's wisdom. The world might tell you to be tolerant, to avoid conflict, to keep the peace. But peace without truth is just silence. And silence, when it betrays your values, isn't peace at all. It's imprisonment. So face it, speak it, own your boundary. And if they can't handle it, let them go. Dignity isn't loud, but it's unshakable. And once you reclaim it, you'll never chase approval again. 4. Emotional manipulation. When guilt becomes a weapon. Guilt is one of the most common tools used by manipulators. But here's the truth. You are not responsible for how someone feels about your boundary. Emotional manipulators often understand something many of us take years to fully realize: guilt can be a leash. When you begin to assert boundaries, especially in relationships where those boundaries have been loose or non-existent, it threatens the dynamic of control. Suddenly, you're not as accessible, you're not as malleable. And to the manipulator, this is unacceptable. They resort to guilt because it is an emotional tether, subtle, invisible, but powerful. They might frame your boundary as selfishness. They'll paint your self-respect as neglect or abandonment. But here's what you must internalize. Their reaction to your healthy decision is not your responsibility. You didn't create their expectations. You're just refusing to continue enabling them. The boundary you set is not cruel. It's care for your own mental and emotional well-being. And caring for yourself is not an offense. It's a necessity. When someone says, I can't believe you would do this to me, they're not talking about your actions. They're talking about losing control over you. That phrase, I can't believe you would do this to me, is not about what you've done. It's about what they're losing. For someone used to manipulating you with guilt, your independence reads like betrayal. But that's because they've come to associate love with compliance. When you break away from that dynamic, they interpret it as abandonment, not self-preservation. What they're truly saying is, I can't believe you're no longer letting me dictate your emotions. This reaction is not about your behavior being wrong. It's about them no longer having power over your choices. And that perceived loss ignites their tactics. They might cry, accuse, sulk, or lash out. These are not signs of your wrongdoing. They are indicators of how deeply their control ran. Let their disappointment be theirs to handle. You are not here to sacrifice your peace for someone else's convenience. The moment you internalize guilt that doesn't belong to you, you begin to betray yourself. Don't apologize for protecting your energy. Don't shrink for someone else's comfort. Guilt is not always a sign of wrongdoing. Sometimes it's the residue left behind when you step into your power after a lifetime of people-pleasing. It feels wrong because it's unfamiliar. But there's a difference between guilt that comes from violating your values and guilt that's been projected onto you by someone who wants to keep you small. When you carry guilt that doesn't belong to you, you begin to chip away at your own identity. You over-explain, you walk on eggshells, you second-guess your truth. Slowly you become a version of yourself that exists only to appease others. But here's the radical truth. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Protecting your energy is not cruelty. It's wisdom. You are allowed to prioritize your peace, even if it makes others uncomfortable. Their discomfort is not your cue to shrink. You're allowed to say no, and you're allowed to not explain it. The need to justify our boundaries often comes from a deep-rooted fear of rejection. We believe that if we say no without a detailed reason, we'll be seen as rude or unloving. But the truth is, no is a complete sentence. It requires no apology, no justification, and no guilt. Every time you explain your no, you invite negotiation, and manipulators will always negotiate. They'll twist your reasons, challenge your logic, and make you question your own needs. But your needs are valid simply because they are yours. You do not owe access to everyone who demands it. You don't need permission to protect your space. Saying no is an act of self-love. It's a declaration that your time, your energy, and your well-being matter. Let your no stand firm. Let it echo with the truth of someone who has chosen themselves. 5. The silent treatment, a weapon of weak control. Don't mistake the silent treatment for maturity. It's not. It's a tactic, a way to destabilize you, make you question yourself, and trigger a reaction. Silence can be sacred, a place of reflection, calm, or necessary pause in communication. But the silent treatment is something entirely different. It is not silence, it's punishment. It's a passive-aggressive manipulation technique that seeks to gain control without ever having to engage directly. When someone uses silence to make you uncomfortable, to provoke anxiety, or to make you chase after them for validation, they are not being emotionally mature. They are wielding absence like a weapon. The silence becomes a void that sucks you into a spiral of confusion. You begin to wonder, what did I do wrong? Did I say something offensive? Are they okay? This is exactly the point. The goal of the silent treatment is to shift the emotional labor onto you, to make you work, to fix something you didn't break. It's not maturity, it's cowardice wrapped in silence. The silent treatment says, I will withhold connection until you fold. But your strength lies in not folding. The message behind the silent treatment is unspoken but loud. I'll ignore you until you become what I need you to be. It is a control mechanism, not a communication method. It's about forcing compliance, not resolving conflict. The person using this tactic wants you to feel so uncomfortable, so abandoned, that you give up your truth just to bring them back. But this is where your strength is tested. The moment you refuse to fold, to chase, to beg, is the moment you take back your power. It may feel unnatural, it may feel cold, but it's actually an act of clarity and self-respect. Emotional connection should never be something someone weaponizes against you. If they truly cared about connection, they'd talk, they'd listen, they'd seek understanding, not control. When you're centered in your truth, someone else's silence can't shake you. You don't chase it. You don't beg. You don't lose sleep. When you anchor yourself in self-awareness and emotional grounding, the silent treatment no longer feels like a void. It becomes just noise. You understand that their silence is not a reflection of your worth, but of their inability to communicate. You don't rush to fill the silence with apologies or justifications. You don't play detective trying to figure out what you did to deserve this. You recognize that mature adults express themselves, even when it's uncomfortable. Emotional maturity involves dialogue, not withdrawal. When you stop internalizing their silence, you free yourself from the emotional roller coaster they want to trap you in. You preserve your mental health, you remain intact. You breathe, you let them sit in their own silence, and you stay rooted in peace. Silence can be a test. and your response is your answer. Do you break yourself to fix what they won't even name? Or do you breathe and let the silence be their mirror? When you allow someone to sit in the consequence of their own emotional avoidance, you reclaim your peace. You realize that you are not the one who needs to chase. You are not the one who must solve the puzzle of their withdrawal. Instead, you stay present with yourself. You focus on your own well-being, your own growth. You journal, meditate, talk to people who honor open communication. You don't engage in the power game. You simply opt out. Let them wonder why the old tactics no longer work. Let them sit in their silence. And you stay rooted in peace. You don't react. You rise. Demand respect by living it. Boundaries aren't walls, they're doors, and only the respectful are allowed through. When you stop tolerating disrespect, whether it's loud or disguised as kindness, you shift your entire reality. You show people how to treat you not by what you say, but by what you allow. So choose peace, but never at the cost of self-respect. Live like someone who believes they deserve respect. Because you do. If this resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. There's more wisdom coming your way, and your journey to inner power is just getting started.